Senator, let's start with school vouchers here. The Senate Education Committee, on which you sit, has already passed the school voucher bill, SB2 here. The though is doesn't seem to be fully universal, giving $10,000 to anyone. It's mainly aimed at specific families who are low income. And you had some issue with that, but does that make it any more palpable to Democrats?
I mean, let me just kind of put it in context. When you look at vouchers, you got to look at the historical context. And Jason, most people view these policymakers view decisions that you make through a historical context or lens. You look at what was the genesis of vouchers. They started back after the Civil War, when white people didn't want to go to school with black people. And so in Texas and other southern states, what did they do? What they did is provided those white persons that wanted to take their kids out of the public school system, put them into private churches, and then gave money to the churches in order to provide the education. That's how they started. Okay. Now here's the issue. Is that still, quote unquote, the predicate that these are based on? I hope not. But you've got to make certain that if you're going to give vouchers, which is being done, you've got to have some accountability and be able to look at what the information is surrounding the persons that are participating. Are we giving parents choice or are we giving private schools choice? That's the issue. And they're not accountability measures in to be able to track exactly who is getting the benefit of these vouchers. When you look at some of these other states, like Arizona as an example, you'll see that over 60% of the persons that are taking advantage of these vouchers are already persons that are in school. Now, are they 100% Anglo? I don't know the answer to that question. But if you look at some of the literature, you'll see that mostly Anglo students in specifically areas that are majority minority are taking advantage of vouchers to the disappointment of the persons that espouse the efficacy and the purposes of these particular vouchers.
You guys have seen a lot of different versions over the years, especially in the last decade or so, that Republicans have been pushing this. Is the version this year, though, any better that Democrats might take a look at it?
Well, I take a look at it every year, every session. I put it like that. And here's the situation. We have consistently said that we want these little poor kids in low performing schools in impoverished areas to get the benefit of having a private education. Well, frankly, this particular bill, as in the one this past legislative session, 88th session, is a universal bill. The fact is that if you don't have enough kids from low income areas, low income now. Now this is what you got to do is look at the definition of what low income is. And when people think of low income, they don't think of people 500% of poverty, of the poverty level. Family of four, that's over 150 something $1,000.
And that's what this bill outlines. That's the limit for this bill, right?
Well, no, it's not the limit. It's the starting point. 80% of the persons that would initially be quote unquote prioritized would be in that particular range, 500% of poverty. And I think it may be it's over 100, it's about $150,000, $160,000. Okay, so that's the first. And if persons in that particular, that's family of four, if people in that particular bracket don't subscribe, then it's open to anyone above and beyond that.
You voted against the bill in the committee there, but you said you think this might be the year that it passes. Why do you think that?
Well, I mean, the vote you look at the vote in the committee. The vote in the committee was 9-2. It's only 2 Democrats.
But the Senate has always passed it, though.
Right. And it's going to be, and the speaker's pretty much said it's going to happen in the House, too. So they have the votes in the House and also the Senate. So the question becomes is whether rural Republicans will listen to their voters and listen to their superintendents about what impact it's going to have on the public schools. And so we've heard in the past that public schools are going to be able to get the funding necessary. Not true. Not true. Based on what I'm looking at, if for some reason you if people don't subscribe to vote for this, last session, the governor held it hostage, that being public school funding. It's going to hold it hostage again this session.
Let me ask you about that. If the Senate and House pass this bill, if it arrives to the governor's desk and he signs it into law, how do you think this legislation, as it's written right now, might impact public education, public schools?
I think there's going, just as vouchers have, there'll be students that will take advantage of these vouchers. And there'll be those that are already in private schools that will be getting a subsidy, $10,000 subsidy as a result of this particular bill. In addition, homeschoolers will get a $2,000 subsidy.
Do you think, though, that school, the big fear critics have said is, oh, if you're taking money out of our classrooms, you're going to give it to somebody else, then we're going to have, less to work with here. Is that a realized fear? Because they say, well, listen, if you have fewer kids, you don't need as much money.
Well, here's the other side of that. You have schools. Look what's going on in Keller. Okay, Keller ISD, which is in our specific geographical area. They have deficit spending right now to the point where they're going to have to look at dividing up their district. And they're not by themselves. You're in a lot of districts right now that are having to shut schools down, but yet still have to maintain the school. Okay. So they have to maintain those particular facilities in their school districts. And so from that vantage point, the question is whether or not the default system in America, that being public schools, will continue to lose students as a result of quote unquote choice. Now, don't get me wrong. I understand that parents have to make the ultimate decision about educating their kids. But historically, the public school system has been the default as it relates to doing that. And any student, regardless of their background, a public school system pretty much has to take that child. And so when you start taking resources from the public school system and kind of tinkering with the formula, that is weighted averages, then that ends up being a problem in terms of being able to have a school system that's functioning.
Yeah, let me ask you the last question on this topic. At the end of the day, what do you think is really at stake here if vouchers pass?
Well, I think what's at stake is making certain it's going to pass. And so what safeguards are you going to have in there? You've got to make certain, let me go back to what I said in the first place. My decisions are informed by history. If you got to look at what the system was, why it came to be in the very beginning. Let's make certain that if we're going to have vouchers, that it achieves the purpose that they're supposed to be achieving. That is providing initially education for young kids that are in impoverished situations in low performing schools, and making certain that we have the demographic information where there's some accountability. There's no accountability in this particular bill whatsoever. We're giving tax dollars to private concerns without putting in place a accountability system similar to that of public schools.
Senator, you're in D.C., where the Democratic National Committee has named a new chairperson this weekend. Where do you think the party should start to rebuild?
Well, we got to start from the ground up. I mean, the reality is that we heard America real clear. I mean, there are kitchen top issues that we must address, that we've historically addressed as a Democratic Party. And I'm pretty certain we're going to do that. And so from that vantage point, we start in the kitchen, at the table, making certain that we provide the assistance that taxpayers want in America. We've got to deal with the issue at the border. We saw that those were two real big issues, and the message that we had did not resonate with voters to the extent that we thought they would.
Last thing I want to ask you about the plane crash in D.C. last night. President Trump came out this morning and had some words to say about it. Your reaction to that?
I think that the words that were stated, that what I heard him say is that this was a result of DEI. Come on. I mean, just because a woman happens to be a woman doesn't mean that that woman is not trained to be involved in making certain that our aircraft get to land safely. And we know that that wasn't the issue. And how can you make such a statement when the investigation hasn't been completed? And so from that vantage point, I thought it was a very irresponsible statement, regardless how you feel about the policy issue concerning DEI.
Senator, good to see you. I appreciate the time.
See you soon.